shuffling of magistrates by the Chief Justice will not work. Kenyans are losing confidence in President Uhuru Kenyatta and the kit of caboodle of Jubilee at a time when the country faces dire crisis of theft on a massive scale, allegedly by the people entrusted with the management of its finances. It is time for President Kenyatta to demonstrate real leadership and true political goodwill and harness all institutions of state to save this country, which must now find the strength to rise from the filth of corruption. Now, for this to happen, the weekend rally warriors who burn fuel hopping from one meeting to the other, corrupting the minds of the people with cheap politics, must now depoliticize the whole fight against corruption or face the people's wrath. Now, the issue is not whose supporter or from which tribe the suspect comes from. The issue is whether there is a prima facie case against them and whether they have been treated fairly and equitably and allowed fair trial. As for the people at the spearhead of this fight, that's the Director of Public Prosecution, Nudin Haji, and the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, and the Chief Justice, David Maraga, they need to know that if they fail the people of Kenya at this crucial juncture, they will not have to wait for history to judge them. They will be judged by the masses of the Kenyan people, disgusted by the musical chairs of arrests and no convictions, and of thieves who continue to fly their ill-gotten private jets as people die of preventable diseases and children learn in the open. The law is not a grenade in danger of going off unless it is handled with most groveling of care. Now, the country is in crisis. It can only be saved by committed, tireless, and honest application of the law. President Kenyatta, the CJ, DPP, and DCI should act like people who know that this country is in crisis. It's no longer business as usual. And tonight, we borrow our quote from the words of Dolly Parton, an accomplished actress and a singer. If your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. My guests tonight, Samuel Kimeo, Celestine Munda, Kwame Owino, and Sidebar Olekanchori. My name is Ken Mijungu. Welcome to our program tonight. Join the conversation. As always, the hashtag is Sidebar. NTV Kenya at Ken Mijungu. Sidebar begins right now.
Sometimes when we say 9 billion has been lost, and then when it goes to court, it is 100 million. The public is asking, what happened to 8.1 billion?
This is just a charade.
Where the ball squarely lies today is the judiciary now.
These are pure sideshows.
Tutaona tu siku mbili tatu tena wameachiliwa.
How can the government be shutting down? The budget process has effectively collapsed.
Kenya si nchi ya uongozi mmoja. Ni ya ugatuzi, ni ya mazungumzo, mawasiliano na makubaliano.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And right at the top, I'd like to ask you this question. What do you make of the arrests, Kwame? What do you make of them?
To be honest, I don't know what to think about it, except that it suggests that there's a series of very serious things that took place. They've been investigated, and there's a possibility of lots of evidence being brought in. But the arrest alone doesn't tell me much. You know, there have been arrests before. So what matters is what evidence the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution has. And when this case starts, then we'll hear what is it the claims are.
To many, Sidebar, they'll say what matters is the conviction, the end of it all. Do you agree?
Well, I agree. But I would say, just to answer your first question, that this time round, I think the arrest, first of all, has, it has been a long time in coming. Yeah, you will agree with me that this is a matter that came up months ago. Was it in February?
Yes, that's when it started.
Early in the year.
February, yes.
So we're talking about close to 6 months or 5 months. And so it is my expectation, and I'm sure the expectation of many Kenyans, that the reason they've taken this long is because they were preparing, a solid case.
Okay.
We expect that by the time that they bring someone of the stature of a cabinet secretary to court, then the DCI, the DPP, must be confident that they have something. We don't know what they have at this point. We can't, you know, the matter is in court. But the fact that they've taken this long should tell us that they're confident
and
that they have
they've
something.
not just taken this long. They have been to Italy, they have been to Dubai, they have been to the US, they have been to England and all that. Celestine, what does this bring to your mind, the rest of someone, the state overseers of Treasury, runs the engine of this country?
I think for me what stood out for me first of all was that one of our institutions is now beginning to take effect, to have the effect that we are looking for. I think in the past, if you look at the last few years, there's been a lot of talk. To have the kind of event we had yesterday is, for me, a significant and very profound movement where we are showing that actually one of our institutions actually works. And I must say, like you know, when you read the detail of the investigation and the whole process of how it worked, it's much deeper than the rest. And it shows thoroughness around the process.
Okay.
And it also gave me the impression that given the type of people that were involved, there was no chance of error. Okay. And that's why they had to go to those levels of investigation.
They had to take a long time, but perhaps they're not just taking their time, they were playing politics with it. I don't know if you agree.
Well, I don't buy the politics card.
Okay.
I think we have to start somewhere in prosecuting. And in this country, in our usual nature, when anyone is charged, there will be a community around them that claims that they're being persecuted. So that doesn't really bother me. What I think I would be interested in is to see what evidence the prosecution produces in court, and more importantly, to see whether they succeed in getting convictions and recovering what has been stolen from Kenyans in this case. Without that, of course, if the DPP actually fails to get convictions in this matter, it will deal a major blow to the fight against corruption in this country.
Okay, so where did this begin, Kwame? Where did this begin? Where did we begin the whole thing? I mean, yesterday I sat there and listened to the DPP, and if you look at how he had framed his words, this was well calculated. It was meticulous. They left everything, they made sure everything was going to plan. But somewhere, I think things went wrong. So looking at it, where did it begin? Because always they say corruption in this country begins at the planning stage, right?
Yes, I mean, remember that these are... Okay, let's start with the fact that we've had a government, this administration, that has a belief in spending big money in the name of chasing development. Part of that money is borrowed, part of it is raised in taxes, and a lot of money is thrown because we've been promised stadiums, dams, all manner of things out there. Whether those are cost-effective ways of achieving development is often left to the fact that if you question that, obviously, you are speaking for the opposition, which is nonsense, but it has currency. So I think part of it is that this is an administration that had a lot of plans. And in a way, it tells me how much little care the administration has taken, going all the way to the president. Because if you look at something like the NYS, which was one of the first big ones, it was similar, high-profile people in the public, questions are raised, but they were ignored, or it was attributed to political games. So I agree with Sam that we can't just say that this is politics. In fact, my view is that there's no way you're going to fight corruption without making it political. There's no way, because the people who actually get to steal are people with political power, and they have muscle. So part of it is planning. You plan big projects, and then you hope that you can skim off money off it, but we've gotten to the point where you plan big projects and you don't spend any of that money at all. You divert a huge amount of it up there. So if you'd looked at the Auditor General's reports for a long time, you would not be surprised. I mean, the scale still could scare you, but you would not be surprised that theft is so brazen in this country. Now, I'm not too sure whether that's the reference he took, but yes, the thoroughness that he suggests that has been done in itself will provide information. We hope convictions come, but the most important thing as a Kenyan and as a taxpayer is also we really want to know the truth. How does 20 billion shillings just disappear? People in government take press statements and say nothing happened, and the other one, I mean, somebody who sits in cabinet as well says that, look, it wasn't 20 billion, it is 7. Right now, it's actually much, much more than that. So it tells you the dysfunction in public finance management. it's really failing. Kenya's public finance management is just leaking a lot of money.
Okay, let's divide this how it happened, because you mentioned that. Now, the first was 46 billion shillings, right? 46, then Treasury negotiates this external commercial facility, and then it goes to 63 million shillings, 17 billion shillings, sorry, 17 more. Then they ensure that the contract term was in dollars. Then they pay it in euros. You see, that was proper thinking, Sam. I don't know.
Well, I think if you examine, our public finance management framework, there have been a lot of violations of the law and the Constitution. And actually, one of the things I noted yesterday was that the DPP swept with a very broad broom, touching questions around how debt is acquired and retired, which in my view is an issue we've been raising, that we believe that we are violating the law in the way debt is acquired, and that we are stealing that money, and that a lot of the debt that we have in our books is odious debt. And that to save this country, we need to audit that debt. But that's politically, it's not politically welcome when you speak about these things, because you basically are casting aspersions on a government that would want to fight back. But the truth will come out, because all the things that the DPP has said, and others he probably will present in court, in my view, open other cases of a similar nature that could very well bring down the entire Treasury establishment and redefine it as we know it.
Not even the Treasury, the whole government. And Celestine, the other example, we have insurance. We've said pre-commitments includes insurance, right? So we get 11 billion and pay for the insurance. Then because we had negotiated and said the interest on this will be paid prior to even commencing this work. So they borrow 4.6 billion and add to the 11 billion and pay for that, right? And then they realize, you know what, we are paying for interest that we have not started using the other principle, so we have to pay interest on interest. That's how dirty it got. Yes.
I think for me, one of the things I have to question, and this is not the first one, is, and we've talked about it for many times, is the strength of our oversight processes and our people in terms of overseeing this. The law is very clear. If you look at the Procurement and Disposals Act, if you look at the PFM, it is very clear around the processes we must follow. If anything, I would say Kenya has one of the best in terms of detail of regulation that we need to follow. However, there is no will to actually follow those, and the worst is that there is no sanction even when it's found to have been flouted. So in this case, what we are saying is the law in terms of procurement allows you, for example, to take certain steps that are not standard, but you have to go through certain approval processes. You have to justify, it has to be motivated. So in this particular case, if you look at it against what the law prescribes, unfortunately it doesn't meet those standards as prescribed here.
Still on the press statement, and CMC de Ravenna, right? The DPP said that they collaborated, the government officials and the KO Valley Development Authority, they collaborated to ensure they gave the contract to this company, which, by the way, was running into headwinds, right? So they collaborated to ensure they gave it. This was deliberate. I don't know what you think. It was deliberate from the beginning.
Ken, before I answer that,
yes,
I think if you look at the scandals in this country, and there have been many grand scandals, you will see a trend. The corrupt in this country, and we're not getting into this particular case, but the corrupt in this country, seem to have realized that the bigger you make it, and the more outrageous you make it, in terms of a scandal, in terms of how brazen it is, the theft and the numbers and the figures involved, the less likely it is for you to be apprehended. And I think if you follow from all the big scandals, from Goldenberg to Anglo Leasing to the others, you will notice that all the big scams, the perpetrators seem to get away with it. And it is also because of how outrageously they do it. It is so outrageous that you can't actually believe that they can do that. To answer your question, and that is part of it actually in this one, I think. If someone is in difficulty, financial difficulties, a company or an individual, that person already has, or that company already has, is vulnerable, right? So this is a company that if it is true, because that has been established that it was going to bankruptcy or liquidation, then that company did not have all the, they were vulnerable. They could easily succumb to any suggestions or, proposals that will be made to them by the people who are paying all this money. So it is possible that they were picked deliberately. It was not an accident. These are people who will accept any, overtures, including corrupt overtures.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
But I think I think your point is important in the sense that if a farm is already vulnerable, it is likely that somebody who's comes with external plans and tells them, look, we can pay this amount of money. But remember, this was not the first time this farm was providing services in Kenya. There were other 3 projects that were ongoing that they'd failed to complete. So if a proper due diligence had been conducted, and remember this is with government, it would have revealed that this farm obviously could not qualify because it had failed to meet the obligations in other projects. So if you add all this together, it's difficult to see who the thread runs to, but it is very, very clear that there was an attempt to actually cheat the public.
On that particular point Kwame has raised, the fact that this company already had other, projects that it was not delivering on, is that perhaps, something to tell us that there was already contact that, maybe even in the ones that were, they were failing to deliver, there could be improprieties, surrounding them. So, there's a lot that can be said. But if you have a farm that has not delivered, you have a farm that has liquidation issues or cash flow problems, and then you go and give them 4 billion upfront, then obviously you need to answer to that, if nothing else.
Actually, if I may just add that, that pattern that my colleague has just described is replicated in quite a number of projects in this country. And I think the latest I recall is the company that was building the high voltage transmission line from Turkana Wind Power into the grid. Exactly the same thing happened. You have a company, it's given work, it goes into bankruptcy, and now you have to, and actually you have, in my view, fairly badly negotiated contracts that impose hefty fines when certain conditions are not met. And it's Kenyan who pay for that, and we don't see people being held to account for those decisions. It's been consistent, but it is probably going to be the first time these questions are being raised about how these things are being done.
All right. Before we take a break, Celestine, break down this for me. 19 billion. How does 19 billion disappear in this market? How does it disappear?
It's actually, as my colleague said, it's incomprehensible that it can disappear. But if you look at it, a lot of it is through fraudulent vehicles that are created. If I look at this company that, it's interesting you talk about that they actually previously provided services and then we still went on to get them. There's a way of paying these people in bits over time and it's sitting in certain accounts. So 19 billion is very easy, to keep in certain accounts. But there's something I wanted, Ken, if I may, and we can pick it up after the break.
Okay.
But when we listen to what we're talking about and also what's in the public domain, I think one of the things we're beginning to ask is where are oversight functions? I think it's something when we need to explore a little bit more because in addition to the CSS being the heads of their function, they have oversight functions. Do they have the capacity, both technical and to look at this area?
Okay, that's something we discussed. But even as we take the break, let's listen to this. When it began in February, this is the kind of exchange that we had then.
We've heard, for example, that the government has lost 21 billion in Kimwarer and Aror Dam, which is a flat lie. The money in question is about 7 billion. And for every coin that has been paid, we have a bank guarantee. No money will be lost because we are a responsible government. We have engaged every arm of government to make sure that public resources are safe, and therefore the correct information must be used as we target the fight against corruption so that we can nail the true culprits. Sometimes when we say 9 billion has been lost. And then when it goes to court, it is 100 million. The public is asking, what happened to 8.1 billion? So we should ask.
Employees were gunned down. Just think who really stands to benefit from this.
What on earth are you trying to say?
Please calm down, Mr. Null. Calm down, please.
That girl lives her life as if she's playing in a poker game. Don't be scared of her, but be careful.
I'm going to go in.
Chansu, don't be stupid.
I've been stupid for long enough. It doesn't really matter right now, does it?
What's going on?
Are you all right? Call the police now.
Somebody tell me something!
Kurai, where is he?
He's in surgery. Everything will be fine.
Where did you come from? What do you have to do with this? Let go! Let go!
I'm going to take a time out to celebrate you. By this time next week, you'll be complete.
This is what you signed up for.
Correction, this is what you signed me up for.
Can you come out so I can see you?
You can't just barge into people's home and take away their children.
Lord, if you hear me, help me, please.
Soil Merchants Property Developers have incredible offers for prime residential and commercial plots in Kiserian Town. Welcome to our open day on 27th July 2019. SMS LAND to 21595.
Recent data from the Ministry of Education indicates that of the 1 million young people entering the job market from universities and colleges every year, only 1 out of 5 is likely to get a job in the formal sector. A report done by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics shows that 5.6 million working-age Kenyans are economically inactive. 3.7 million of the employed persons in the working-age population are underemployed, and the largest unemployment rate is recorded between the age of 20 to 24 years. Join us at the 9th edition of the Nation Leadership Forum on the 29th of July, coming to you live from the University of Nairobi. The discussions will revolve around enterprise business, financial inclusion, and the next generation of work. Nation Leadership Forum, engaging society, impacting the nation. Proudly brought to you by these sponsors.
We have really pushed. We have worked, and we've worked with various agencies across the world who have been very supportive to our investigative and our prosecutorial bodies. And that's why we're saying where the ball squarely lies today, and where I and the majority of Kenyans are looking forward to, is the judiciary now.
All right, a very interesting perspective and view there, but a lot of people would argue that the president has been vindicated, and they're truly on the path of fighting graft in this country. So even as we continue the conversation here, we'd like to be playing a poll that was done for the Elephant by Odipo Dave. We'll just be playing it on split screen so that you see the level of debt, how it's been rising consistently over the years until when that poll was done. So we'll be playing it on split screen. But let me welcome you back, and obviously I'll give you the first opportunity to conclude your remark based on the responsibilities of the people that are assigned these duties.
Yeah, so I think it's really important for us to pause and think around the governance issues around this, because what we're saying during the break is, will this thing ever end?
Okay.
Will it end? So unless we have really robust oversight processes, which is people in this case, then it won't stop. It begs the question, therefore, around what is the role of Parliament and the National Assembly in looking and providing oversight over such projects, because the law actually mandates the National Assembly to have oversight over that. So I guess the question is, in their role, do they get the information when they should? Is it too much? Do you get volume such that you can't even digest it? Or when you do you turn a blind eye? There's a question around, do you actually have the technical capacity? And actually the laws allows you, if you don't have the technical capacity, you can actually call on experts to support you to look at this. Or is it deliberate? So there's quite a lot of questions we need to ask, because we could have these discussions, we could be sitting here next year, and they could be getting bigger, as you've said, and it doesn't go away. And we really need to dig deep and find out how we'll get our country out of this.
All right, we already know we're in a very deep hole. So the question is the country at the verge of collapse? Do you think we've gotten to that level, or there's still hope?
Okay, now, let me take us back a little on how significant is this arrest, you know, so that we don't get tempted to just think it is another arrest. You know, there have been many, and perhaps, you know, it could get to a point where, you know, we're getting used to it. But as I answer your question, this particular arrest is extremely significant. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance and his peers, you know, represent, I would say, perhaps the most important, you know, docket in government. Every docket in government, you know, is pegged on finances. Every docket. And every life of a Kenyan, you know, is pegged on how those finances are managed. The CS Finance and his docket, they're basically our bank as Kenyans. Not as government, as Kenyans, they're our bank. And they're much more than a bank, because, you know, your bank, you take your money, but you can take it out whenever you want. But these ones, we take our money, we don't know what they do with it, they decide what to do with it. You can imagine, Ken, if you woke up tomorrow and you're told your banker is a thief, that you cannot trust your banker with your money. Even if it is little money, you'll go and withdraw it, you know. Number two, this, you know, this ministry, I would say, is probably, you know, from the president to the deputy president. I know people put the CS Interior, but I would say this even goes above CS Interior in terms of hierarchy and in terms of importance. And that this ministry right now is, you know, is in this position and has put itself in this position. You know, we are left wondering, are we in 6 trillion, you know, debt because of this? You know, we're left wondering, how much worse is it? You know, these are the same people who have managed our finances for the last 6 years. How much more have they mismanaged? You know? And I think we need to ask ourselves those very critical questions. And like Kwame, I think it's important, much as, yes, convictions are important, but it is important also for these cases to come out, so that this information can come out in the public domain, and so that we can begin to engage in such discourse.
Okay.
Yes. So
right.
For me, it's very important.
All right, Kwame, so have we hit the rock bottom? Same question. As the poll was running by Odipo Dev, I realized that there have been 40 scandals since 2013. 0 conviction. Out of the 40, 0 conviction. And then about 567 billion shillings lost in this scandal. So have we hit rock bottom?
Well, it apparently looks like not yet. But
when will that be?
No, I mean, look, nobody knows. Nobody knows. But I mean, the confidence with which people who are in the public sector continue to steal public money, and of course they have the political surrogates who protect them or who might benefit from that as well, tells you that nobody understands how serious it is. And often when the bottom falls off a country, you don't know that it's tomorrow. I mean, all these things just converge like it happened yesterday. Many of the people who are today probably, who were summoned, didn't know that it was going to happen. It just happened, and many of them saw it on TV. So nobody knows. But that it's serious, it is. I mean, if you talk about 60 billion shillings, 63 billion, of which, of course, 20 or thereabouts have already been sent out and lost, 60 billion is the amount of money we use to spend all 15 million Kenyan kids to school.
Annually?
Yes.
Okay.
Both free primary education and the free secondary education. That's 16 million lives.
So a group of people just wiped
So a group of, and
yes.
it's probably not the only one, because obviously if you go to the other dams and the other dams that were incomplete, you go to the last mile issues, you go to the Kenya pipeline, you'll go to the Ministry of Agriculture, and you'll go to the Afia House problems that we had and NYS. Obviously, so basically those are the costs we are paying, and it's easy to cite, but the problem is who is supposed to watch. And it's not as if really these are surprises. Every single year the Auditor General releases, fine, it's 2 years behind, but it releases reports identifying goods paid for which were not delivered. It's a similar thing as this, so that somebody is paid in advance and nobody knows whether they've provided the works, whether they provided the plan. So remember, one of the biggest things about these dams, that it's not like there's no need for the dams. The dams were there, but the bidding and whoever won the bid even without providing a plan.
Yeah, 4 years later. 4 years
So
later.
even it begs the question, how was it even determined that 60 billion is enough? If he has not provided plans to show you what he's going to do, how was it even determined that you'll start work on this day and finish on this day? How was that determined? So that's what tells you, and it's huge. So what it takes to educate all 15, 16 million children in a year was probably shared around 28 people. I mean, maybe not all of them are guilty, certainly, but around 28 people at the cost of 16 million children. And Kenya's parliament will sit up there and tell us that all this is politics. It tells you. I mean, there's failure at many levels. Okay. And when you have failure at those many levels, this is a country close to collapse. Okay. That's the point.
All right. So the rock bottom, and then when will it collapse, Sam? You have been doing this for a long time. When will it collapse?
Well, I think like Kwame, it's difficult to say when it comes. When it comes swiftly. Yeah. It comes swiftly, and Kenya is not immune to the kind of problems we've seen in Sudan and other places where people overrun the streets and bring down their government. We are actually not immune to that. Ultimately, if our institutions don't do their work, that is what is going to happen in the end. And I am not a prophet of doom. I am just looking at the natural order of things, that if we don't arrest this, it will degenerate. The unfortunate thing is that when it degenerates, you have no control over it. So I personally would like a situation where our institutions take control and deliver us from the abyss that we are in into a proper path of development, integrity, and equity, I would say. So it's hard to say when this is going to happen. This country has lost a lot of money, certainly, and I think it confirms, the words of the old man from Madaya, that this country actually is rich enough to fund its own development.
Okay.
And I think it's something we've squandered, unfortunately. I think what I would equate this is a father who leaves an inheritance to the children, and they squander it within a couple of years after he leaves the scene. That we have squandered. The premium that we had gotten in terms of economic velocity of moving us forward is lost. And now we probably are looking at a generation, particularly of young people, who cannot be very optimistic about life as we did ourselves.
Okay. Okay. So, Celestine, how much of this trouble has been caused by our ranking as a middle income economy by the World Bank? How much of this? Because we have gone to a borrowing spate, there are no more aids from these institutions, and we have to look for the money, and we create loopholes by looking for that money as avenues of corruption. So how much of our problem can you attribute to this?
I don't know if I would attribute it to that. I think, if I look at the extent of corruption, and as my colleagues have said, rising, and it's not that it's been there for years. It didn't come before we got to what we're calling now the middle income state. It's always been there. It's just rising, and we are getting bolder around this. I think in terms of the earlier question around whether, and I want to link it to this, whether we are about to collapse, my own view, I can't answer that one specifically, but I do think that the significance of the arrest that was made yesterday and where we've reached is such that there's some key transaction at the transactional level of government that can't even proceed as we speak. We are right in the middle of completing the discussion on the division of revenue bill for counties. That can't proceed. And I'm even wondering the people who come in, whether anyone now has the guts to sign anything, because anyone is afraid, unless they'll be probably afraid for a few months, and then after that, this continues. So I do think it has had a major impact on the transactional level. I do believe it's also had a major impact in terms of eroding investor confidence. Yesterday, I think we closed it, was it 103.65? We don't know how far that will go. And then that will just, then trickle down to the lowest person in terms of their spending ability. And that's something we need to look at. So I don't believe that, you know, to your question now, coming back, that this is as a result of us now achieving middle income status, and therefore we have to now go and borrow and feed this. There wasn't even the infrastructure to feed it in the first place. So I think this is just us having, you know, gone against our laws, which are very robust. It's as a result of our institutions, which have tried. You can see some of them are now trying. Like if you look at what DPP, Nurdin Haji, and the EACC, we are now beginning to have pockets of excellence. What we need is more of those, and we need to start going into, is there a way we can identify pockets of excellence and really strengthen them so that we can start making a statement to the rest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kwame, you don't feel there's a part that our ranking has played in all this?
No, I don't think so. I think we just used it because, I mean, the ranking is actually supposed to show that you're a stronger economy, you have a little bit more robust systems. We would have taken this anyway. I mean, if we were not ranked, we'd probably be just using that same money from this concessional lending to use it for. It's only that we actually went for more expensive debt, the commercial debt. I mean, the 3 Eurobonds that we've completed, the very first one had us with a scandal spinning, not completely resolved, even if eventually the money came into the country, or at least we've been told it came into the country. So my view is that we just stepped into a new area with very weak systems, and it's showing. I mean, it's showing that we have weak systems, but also impunity. And the worst part about this is that the reason nobody should be happy about what happened yesterday and what's happened today is because it shows that the dishonest people are ahead of all of us, in the sense that we have to play catch up. Yeah. Good public finance management systems actually prevent this from taking place in the first place. So basically, as I said again, that 63 billion shillings is equivalent of paying all our 200,000 teachers for 4 months. And that's a plan that a few people hatched, and they've probably made away with it. These are not small sums of money anywhere in the world. They're not small sums of money anywhere in the world. So if you're leaking that amount of money, it tells you whether you're middle income or not, you definitely have a big problem with your systems. And it's not just at the Treasury, as people seem to think. Okay. Oversight in Parliament. Everybody who's supposed to do their work obviously failed to do it, to enable this kind of money to leak consistently.
What you're saying doesn't inspire confidence at all. It's
Our
very bleak, the future for us.
Our ranking,
yes.
as Celeste said, and Kwame is saying, and also Sam, our ranking has nothing to do with any of this. Okay. In fact, if anything, we are ranked there because of our own, the things we
push
do.
for it.
No.
Okay.
We are the ones who have taken ourselves to that ranking. If we have the custodians of our finances, basically plundering the same. We have people who we have entrusted with our resources. Instead of putting those resources to the proper use, small as they may be, those resources, if they were used in the right manner, President Kibaki ran this country for 10 years and practically, removed our foreign debt completely. We were almost self-reliant in 10 years. And I think the economists will tell us that. Almost self-reliant in 10 years. We have given a different, crop of leaders the responsibility. We have tripled our national debt. Tripled in less than 6 years.
But times change, and they needed to have done something that was not done prior to 2013. You can't blame them for that.
No, you can blame them because it shows, this is an indictment. Not just this, but the way they're managing the resources is a problem. It is not what they're doing. If they were borrowing to do the right things and they were utilizing the resources. The same project we are talking about, Aror and Kimwarer, if we go back, to our records, the same project was budgeted at 16 billion shillings.
Yes.
16 billion shillings. And a dam of 16 billion, I suppose, is not a small dam. Okay? The same dam went to 43 billion. It was approved. Somehow, someone thought 43 billion is very little money. 43 billion. Kwame has told us what 16 billion can do. Someone thought 43 billion is not enough. I don't know for what. They inflated it, or they took it to 60-something billion. And the money that has been lost, because I've seen some of the court papers, what the prosecutors are saying has been lost, is not even the 21 billion that we have been hearing. it is 27 billion.
Really?
27 billion that is said to have been lost. And I know it is in the public domain that the Deputy President has said it's not 21 billion, it is only 7 billion. And Ken, if it is 27 billion, 21 billion, 7 billion, it is still taxpayers' money that needs to be explained where it went. You know, and I know they have said, people are saying that the defenders of these projects talk about, you know, insurance, they talk about bank guarantee, they talk about, you know, at some point they were even talking about government guarantee, which is not true. You know, they have shifted the truth a bit so that we get lost. What there is insurance, that this money was insured. 11 billion was insured. But you know, Ken, first of all, the reason that we pay such high premiums in insurance, or even if it was a bank guarantee, and the reason that we will pay so much to guarantee that money, it is because we are a high risk factor. Because they know whoever is giving us this insurance or whatever, they know they cannot trust us with this money. They know the risk of losing the money, and for them paying the money, if they end up guaranteeing it, is very high. So it goes back to actually the point of your ranking, of the issue of the ranking. All these factors that we can insure money, then steal it. And then when we steal it, we say it has not been lost because we insured it. You know, this money cannot, you know, the insurance cannot pay without knowing how it got lost.
Okay.
You know, you cannot steal your own money and then you say it was insured, so the insurance should pay.
Okay.
Even insurance are not that foolish.
But when I said you expect the economy to grow and you expect the new crop of leadership to do something different, you exclaimed. You didn't like that comment.
No, I was just wondering how it is possible if your income is constant or near constant and your expenditures are increasing way beyond your income and you continue widening that gap, how you expect to survive in the long run. I mean, these are the finance principles, the financial management 101. Live within your means, and if you have to borrow sustainably. But if you have, you know, income that has plateaued and expenditures that are increasing, and a parliament that doesn't seem to care that deficit is there and it's increasing, you are bound to crash at some point. It's a basic principle of financial management. If you do it yourself, we will auction you very soon. Yeah.
I know, I can't even risk it.
Yeah. Don't try it.
Someone likened the budgeting of a country to budgeting in your house. It's a basic principle. It's the same principle. Yes. All right. Time now for another break. When we come back, I'd like to talk about the fact that the government has moved out of this country to look for investigative authorities. They're looking at FBI. They're looking for a similar kind of investigators who have helped, like serious fraud unit from the UK, to come and help with this. In fact, I was told that the ESCC, they have embedded a special prosecutor and a special investigator to help with this. But my interest is, will it really work, or it's just another way of cover-up? So remember the QC who was here for that prosecution? All right, time for another break. But when we come back, I'd like to talk about that. Right, we take a break.
Tanzania is the latest nation to ban the importation, production, sale, and use of plastic bags. What is the impact of this ban to the economy?
Landscaping is important because it's life, it brings life. I grew a passion for plants and flowers. It was a hobby that I just decided to turn into a business. Personal grooming is a very important part of our everyday lives. I am in Lagos, Nigeria to find out how you can look the part without having to dent your wallet.
Where are we headed as a country?
Every time we make a step forward, we do two backwards.
Any fool with huge amounts of money can be president of this country. It is no longer about service.
Why can't we move these people out and find somebody who can make the right decision for the country?
But you're the experts, you can tell me.
We have to change the way we arrive at our leaders. We have to.
Organized crime, terrorism, and corruption, they're really siblings.
We don't need 10 cases. We just need 2 cases done properly, and it will serve a lesson.
Justice can only be found if I prosecute what I have claimed, bring the evidence, and say this man is guilty.
AM Live, every weekday morning on NTV.
Right, welcome back to Sidebar. With me this evening in studio is Sam Kimel from Transparency International, Celestine Munda from Ernst & Young, Kwame Owino from IEA, and Setabao Olekanchori, who's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really interested on how we are going to resolve this, because there's a problem in our hands, and we understand from previous arrests and prosecution that it's going to take a long time while the prosecutions are done, but we still need to inspire confidence. So before I go into that, I'm trying to picture out the kind of a person, and Celestine mentioned this in passing, who will accept to sit at the Treasury right now. It's a hot seat. Let me start with you. The kind of person who fits this bill. Remember President Uhuru Kenyatta was a finance minister. And remember 10 years ago, I'm going to tell you about that. What happened? The typing error. We'll talk about that, yes. But the kind of a person.
No, I don't believe that. I don't know, because I haven't had that the cabinet secretary together with the principal secretary have resigned. But I think maybe after today, and they were bailed, which is a good thing, it's their constitutional right, they should speak to their boss and find out whether they'll be going to work or not. It's clear that they were told that by the courts that the Treasury is a crime scene, so they cannot go back to the office. So my view is they should ask, if there were people of good conscience, they could call the president and ask, look, who should we hand over to, so that the work can continue, because the republic must continue to be managed. If they haven't done that, then the president himself should do it and ask them to do that. Are there capable people who can run the Treasury? Yes, because the Treasury is not individuals.
No, not capable.
It is run. It's run by rules.
Accept to do this.
It's run by rules and regulations, and if you adhere to those rules and regulations, you have nothing to fear. So my view is that we shouldn't make it look like there's a crisis.
Okay. Okay. Wakili.
Well, the answer to that, I think, is simple. Hopefully, an honest person. You know, someone who, like Kwame says, will go there and follow the rules. You know, apply whatever standards that need to be applied. For once, let us have someone who we can trust, you know, to manage our finances, and someone who hopefully is not, you know, a politician.
Honest or radical?
Honest. You just need to be honest, Ken. Some of these things you just need to be honest. Someone who can say, you know, if that, you know, the arm is being twisted, they can tell us, you know, someone like that. But then there was a question that you asked earlier that I don't think I answered. I think you addressed it to me. And the question was, how did we get ourselves here? And I think this is something that cannot be overlooked. There was a point in this government, the Jubilee administration, when, you know, it was not possible to tell them that, you know, everything that they were told was, you know, they would throw it and say, that is politics. That is from the opposition. That is, you know, our detractors. That is not, you know, that is not true. It is only, you know, porojo, as they would say. And I'm sure some of the people who are involved in some of these things did not anticipate a handshake situation. You know, a handshake situation. It is this handshake situation, I'm about to put the shisha. It is the handshake situation that has actually made this possible. It would not have been possible, Ken, if the opposition and the government were not working together as they are to have this situation.
But it happened.
It would not have been possible.
Well, it happened even in the years before the handshake. There are several scandals that were unearthed. The opposition was on the real opposition.
Ken, this one goes way above just the CS, I will tell you. This one goes beyond just that ministry we're talking about. This is going to strike at the heart of this government. I can tell you for free. You know, if you look at the figures that are being talked about, if you look at the defenders of these projects and of this, what has now turned out to be a criminal case, if you look at the defenders and the potential defense witnesses, you know, led by no less than our own deputy president. He was the strongest defender, the strongest defender. He has come out and said, I know everything about this thing because I'm a herds boy. I'm the herdsman. I'm the herdsman of this money. So I know that it is not this money that was lost. It is this much. And you know, Ken, I keep cows, and I have herdsmen at home. I employ herdsmen. Some of them are thieves, by the way. Some of the herdsmen are thieves. So if the fact that you're a herdsman does not mean you cannot steal. And if you go and you find your goats or cows have been stolen, and someone has taken your cows and replaced them with other cows, as we're being told, it is still theft. I will still fire that herdsman. So that is my take on that.
All right, Sam, what's
Well, I think the first question about the person who is fit to run this
who
place,
even accept that
actually
job?
No, there are people who will accept the job. I think these are dignified jobs, and there are very many people who would be willing to take up these positions. But as my colleagues have said, you need honest and principled people. But the question that is running through my mind is when you have a systemic problem, when politics is about harnessing political power for purposes of personal gain and parochial gain, what chance does a public official, a bureaucrat, have against that system?
Okay.
That is the question that is running through my mind. Because the things that we are saying that these ladies and gentlemen are accused of are not things that you can just pull off. And I agree with my colleague here that it will probably go wider than we can see at the moment. I do not think that these are things you do without the system giving tacit approval. And I would hazard a guess that when the truth is finally found, it will have everything to do with the last election and the coming election.
Okay.
Because that is the history that has repeated itself in this country, that every election has a scandal that is supposed to raise money for campaigning.
Okay.
And what has changed in the last couple of years is it's no longer a scandal. You have many scandals. So I wouldn't be surprised.
That means you have hope. You think there is goodwill, and we could get to the roots of this. You believe there's some goodwill?
I think we have to get to the root of this. I do not know whether in this case we will get to the root of it.
Okay.
All I know is that we have no option but to get to the root of our corruption problems.
Okay.
Because if we don't get to the root of corruption problems, it will consume us. And when it consumes us, all of us will be losers. So I am very optimistic about the future of this country in terms of ethics and integrity.
Okay.
But that requires leadership. We're talking about prosecutions now, but who is talking about ethical standards? When people are being appointed, say, if this gentleman resign, and I think by operation of the law they're supposed to leave office, they'll have to leave office. The people are going to be appointed. What is the integrity threshold that is going to be applied? If we use the same standard we used in 2013, we will find ourselves here in a couple of years down the line.
Okay.
You know, Transparency International Kenya and a number of our partners in the run-up to the elections ran what we call the Red Card campaign. It drew, names of people who had unresolved questions of integrity from different public reports, Auditor General's reports, parliamentary reports, investigations being carried by the EACC and so on and so forth. We wanted to raise the bar of integrity in the elections. We didn't succeed, even though, in my view, the IEBC simply just abdicated its constitutional mandate to do this. But the people that have been mentioned over and over again, many of them today are in court being charged. And more will be coming.
Including people you mentioned in the Red Card.
So you can actually see into the future that you are having a problem. And we've seen appointments, even appointment, leave alone elections. We've seen appointments where people are being appointed into office when they have scandals hanging over their heads. When you do that, you simply are sinking, you're digging the hole deeper, because that person is not going to change unless the law is used to make them change.
And that's where the politics that Sidebar was speaking about comes in, because if you look at the approval regime in this country of this appointment, it's really disappointing, to say the least. So Celestine, you mind the kind of person who will accept that job going forward, because it's a hot seat. Earlier I mentioned during the broadcast that Mwai Kibaki was the longest serving finance minister. Apart from Mwai Kibaki, the rest no one did about 4 years. I can't remember who did about 4 years. Then we come to Rotich, who does 6 years.
I think what I would like to add in addition to being honest and principled, it has to be someone with strength of character. And it deals with the issue, Bonakimeo, you're saying around the bureaucracy is so strong that it will just sweep the person away. I believe we have today in Kenya examples of ministries. We're talking about interior and coordination. I was thinking of Dr. Matiang'i when he was in education. There was impact. I do realize that's not National Treasury, but I think it requires a strength of character of someone who is going to forge ahead despite, because it is true the tide is very strong. So it requires someone who has those, so you're honest, you're principled, but you must have the strength of character, because it is not easy to operate when the tide is so strong.
Okay, but sometimes these appointments are also made, I appoint you to be my gatekeeper, so it's really difficult also to achieve that.
Then that's different. That's different, because then I will pander to your, to what you're asking.
Yeah. I hope the audience doesn't think that we think that these people are necessarily guilty. I think what is clear to us is some crimes were committed. Just based on what the level of culpability is something that the courts will determine, but it's clear some crimes. You pay in advance to a company that is known not to have performed before. There's significant violations of the Public Finance Management Act, Public Procurement Act, and even the laws related to PPPs, which is basically public-private partnerships. So obviously those were. Now whoever is responsible is a different matter. I think as well that so that we do not look like we impugn the credibility of these individuals, they will be examined. I think the courts will hear, and if they're found guilty, fine. If they're not, that's it. But what I know is this: irrespective of what happens to, and especially starting with the cabinet secretary and the principal secretary, I think it will be a signal to whoever comes into these offices that the level of integrity that is required is such that you will not use as an excuse the fact that I was pressured by a phone call from somebody in the president's office or in this other place. And if we take it like that, I think that's all for the better. So whoever comes in must understand that even the small people, the people who sat in procurement committees, because my view is, I think Celestine is right, the idea that we think that only the people who make top decisions and who do signing of checks and obviously authorized payments are the only corrupt ones is not true. This is a systemic problem. And it requires a very significant person who's prepared to actually create disruption completely, even within the system, to actually send the message. If you think about it, if the president and deputy president, who are actually the heads of government, with the executive branch, are not prepared to disrupt, including getting rid of many people in their cabinet, they're not going to solve this problem. And in my view, they bear responsibility irrespective of who gets charged for the fact that there's this much dysfunction in the Treasury itself. So let's get the right people. They may pass the vetting, because the vetting process, you also know that Parliament doesn't take it as seriously as this. Some of the questions they ask are not necessarily related to credibility. They are completely different things. So anybody who comes may come with a clean reputation, but if you find a system that allows you to be pressured to sign things and to enable political decisions to be made, which undermine the management of public finances, they are now forewarned that will not be an excuse, and the DPP doesn't care, which is a good thing.
At least they have a reference point, If I do this, I'll be standing in the dock myself, That's something that is very public right now. But let's examine the fact that the government perhaps think that Kenya alone will not be able to do this. I don't know from where you're standing, because you seem to think there's someone with the credibility that will run that institution so long as that independence is guaranteed. But the fact that the country is moving out of our own institutions, right, and looking outside, the other agencies that they believe can help in this fight, does that not also show that perhaps we are not confident in ourselves?
No, I disagree. I disagree, Ken. The nature of cross-border crimes are such that it requires cooperation across. Because the people who take billions of shillings in money know how to send that money and to fragment it throughout the world and then bring it back in. So it's not just, in my view, in fact, this is not just theft of public money, it's also money laundering, because the DPP suggests that the money went out, came back in services and goods for some people, and in some cases went to Dubai and came back as cash for others. So seeking cross-border cooperation to be able to solve these things, this kind of crime, because they're also financial crimes in their own right, and money laundering, is the order of the day. No one can do it on their own, because this thing crosses jurisdictions. People even travel out there to make sure that it's split in different ways. So in that way, cross-border cooperation is an important one. In fact, my view is there's no way you're going to solve these big problems without cross-border cooperation at the region and even at the global level.
Okay. If I may also add to that point, there's actually nothing wrong with looking for help across the borders. We get international contractors to build our roads. We don't make our own cars. There's so much that we don't do for ourselves. We look for people and countries that have this capacity to help us do these things. I think when it comes to law enforcement, it should be different. And getting help from other agencies doesn't mean that you're incompetent or that we don't have faith in our people. It simply means that we are seeking for collaboration that is likely to give us results in the end. Because remember, these countries also come to us looking for help in resolving their own criminal situations in their own countries.
Okay.
So we are a global, we are a citizen in the state of nations, in the community of nations.
Okay.
So we cannot be isolated. We must be willing to look for help whenever it is, and to offer that help whenever it's requested.
But everyone has a price. Where do you put that notion? Everyone has a price.
Well, I think questions of integrity are at the core. I actually don't believe that everybody has a price. It is actually not true. There are honest people who, given the job, irrespective of whether you give them the world, they will actually deliver honestly.
Okay.
But more importantly, in my view, is we need an ethical transformation. Besides the prosecutions, I cannot emphasize enough that for us to move forward as a country, we need to build our integrity system.
Okay.
That requires leadership, and it involves a lot of very many small bits of the way decisions are made. We have to return this country to the rule of law.
Okay.
We departed from the rule of law long time ago. If you were to document the violations of the Constitution and the laws in this country for the last 5, 6, 7 years, you'll be surprised that the list will be running into, hundreds of violations.
How far do we have to go with this? I'll come to you. How far do we have to go if we have to achieve this? How far back?
Well, I think there is no immunity for criminal cases. And I think to emphasize the point Kwame was making, there are those who think that if you come and do crimes now and go away, they will not catch up with you. Look at Latin America as we speak. People are being prosecuted for crimes that they committed 20, 30 years ago, and are having to spend the 80s and the 90s years of their lives, in prison. So anyone who thinks that because this country has been dysfunctional insofar as the enforcement of the law is concerned, and thinks that it will remain that way, they are very mistaken.
Okay.
They are creating a problem for themselves in the future, and the future of their children.
Okay.
Okay. And Ken, while we are still talking about the character of the person we want to, to get in these offices, and it's not just that, the office of CS Finance. I think every public management office, there's no one who is claiming that money was not lost. Everybody accepts that money was lost. 7 billion, whether it's 7 billion, 21 billion, or whatever. The person that we want, or the people that we want to manage our affairs, are the kind of people that if 7 billion shillings is lost under your watch, you resign. You don't wait for Haji or Kinoti to come for you. You resign. That is the kind of person we want. How can you lose 7 billion shillings of Mama Mboga? Because that is Mama Mboga's money. How can you lose 7 billion or 21 billion or 27 billion of, hardworking Kenyans who have, sacrificed to wake up every morning, to walk to work, to pay their taxes, and then you come and say, we've lost 7 billion shillings. The kind of person we want is the kind of person who, if they lose 7 billion, or even if they lose 7 million, or even 70 shillings, they resign.
Okay.
Number two, cross-boundary cooperation. This money, you asked earlier, where did this money go? I'm sure if 7 billion was lost, most of it is not in this country. There's no way we can investigate money that has been deposited in Italy, London, or whatever, without involving those agencies, those police agencies, law enforcement agencies in those countries. So it is very much in order, I think, to involve them. Not only that, some of the accused persons in this case are actually foreigners. So there is no way you can involve or bring them over without involving police officers or agencies and courts in their countries.
Okay.
So I think it is just obvious that we must involve transboundary agencies.
Can I? Yeah. So I would just like to pick on the point of integrity and values. I think our constitution allows and provides for the building of values and principles around how we operate, and it's clear. But I think if you look at addressing this is actually about people and about our leaders, because as we said earlier, we do have structures and systems, there's no question. But the oversighting, the leadership around that, and the people, that's where our entire value system, the fabric of who we are, is almost actually sad. I think even just the fact that you steal exams for your children, it's broken. So it requires a combination of overhauling the value system, which is a long process.
Okay.
But we shouldn't give up. And we need to be looking at ways of how do you actually build back our value systems of taking a ream of paper from the office is wrong.
Okay.
You're talking about 1 shilling. How do we build that value system in us? And then how do we combine it by actually making sure that we hold people accountable, and if they are found, if due process is followed and they are found guilty, that actual sanctions have been applied. You talked about 40 scandals, of which 0 have been prosecuted. That means there's been no sanction. So it will still keep on happening. So I think it's looking at a combination of that. And I wanted to bring another point around, which is probably another avenue we haven't looked at, around public participation, which is again provided for in the Constitution and in our laws around getting the public to participate in matters legal or financial or of things like that. And it applies at all levels, whether it's national or county. Have we probably thought of breaking this down beyond what's written on the laws? Because it's very high level. And is there a need to educate the very lowest person and actually getting them involved, not only in the setting of the budget, breaking it into distinct parts, where it's setting of the budget, and then it's actually prescribed where we are saying every quarter we will meet. So if you say this quarter we got 1 billion, and the 1 billion, so much will go into recurrent expenditure, so much into development, even at the ward level, then at the quarter we want to see it, and you're not going to get funds released unless that public participation has come. So we need to look at some of those.
All right.
Ken, if I may, I think the question of public participation hinges on the willingness of our leaders to facilitate that kind of environment. And I think it's quite clear, just looking at the counties, for example, that many of them are not interested, and that they pay lip service to public participation. And that counties that have made honest attempts, you can see the results, even in terms of their own accountability and their own development outcomes. So the law is there. Citizens, by the way, know these things, because when you are interacting with citizens, for example, at the village level, you're not speaking about huge national level esoteric programs. You are basically talking about their own situations, and they know when they have been swindled. So as I move around, citizens stop me and tell me, this bridge, how much do you think it cost? And they give you their own estimates, which they have calculated, the metal, how much it costs, the cement, the sand, and they can actually tell you an estimate, and
Yes.
they know they have been swindled. The problem is, when you have all these points of theft scattered all over the country, how do you make sure that our institutions are able to focus not just on the big scandals, but also at the village level.
Okay.
So that any citizen who sees a project that is questionable in their own vicinity are able to get help from our institutions. I think that's the challenge of our law enforcement agencies.
Okay, I'm going to read this tweet for a specific reason because it's tweeted by Ndungu Wainaina from ICPC. He says that Kenya's corruption, debt and economic fiscal malaise are not domiciled at the Treasury, neither will they be fixed from their problem at the helm. Rotich and Thuge have been at the Treasury for close to 6 years. Do you think they put the country in this horrible mess without the top knowing? I think he's really thrown this pan into the world.
Okay, I think, whatever it is, and I can't read President Uhuru's mind or the Deputy President's mind, and nowhere have they ever said that they condone corruption. But that it's this bad reflects very badly on them. I actually think that they both lack the credibility to actually state that they're actually leading and adhering to the constitutional principles and on the public finance management chapter. I doubt that they've read Article 201. If this is what is happening, because that would be, because to say that for 4 years you have a project worth billions of shillings, procurement is taking place, all money is moving in and out of the country, and you are unaware, and you call yourself the chief executive of the office, reflects very poorly on him, the president and all that. So that's why you hear such comments which suggest that, look, it is not possible to steal 27 billion shillings from Kenya without some kind of concurrence or some slight winking on the side of the president, his deputy, or somebody in cabinet. That's true. That's telling. It's an indictment in the sense that people sit in cabinet with others, and this is not the only one. And I'm sure others will come when the Auditor General's reports come. That almost every public office, or rather every public, every state department has serious violations of the laws, and the president is right up there, and all he can do is preach to us or come and speak during the conference on anti-corruption. It's clear. It's actually showing us that do we really have a competent chief executive, or rather do we really have a competent president and deputy president when it comes to managing public affairs? This is a very sad case, but he's giving us the impression that perhaps we don't.
They can't be everywhere. That's why they have all these CSs and PSs also.
Yes, but they must take responsibility. They can't run away from this. 20 billion shillings has disappeared while they were
under the watch. Right.
Again, in any other part of the country where the law actually matters, the whole government would have resigned. The entire government would have resigned. For a scandal like this to come out, it is not enough to take 2-3 people to court and leave the rest. Like Kwame said, you cannot move 27 billion shillings around without the involvement of the top leadership. And I think, if you follow, and I think I'd already made, my position on this clear. If you follow the people who have been defending, Rotich himself has actually been fairly tight-lipped on this matter himself. He hasn't. He has had defenders, So perhaps if you really want to know more about this, there are people who have a lot of information other than Rotich. There are guys who have been saying they know everything about this issue. And unfortunately, these are people who are at the top leadership in this country. And it's I think it's very sad. But let me tell you something, Ken, that we have, as Kenyans, we have been fed so much of this kind of thing that at some level, we are actually used to it, at some level. Unfortunately. And I was telling someone earlier today that some things become so, normal that you feel like, as much as they are so, off, but you feel like, it's normal. If you drive the way, even you can, I don't know how you drive, but I'm sure you're a very good driver. But I'm sure if you drove the way you drove to work this morning in London, you'll be arrested. And most Kenyans, the way we drive is we drive without really following the rules. And it has become normal. We don't even know that we're not following these rules. It is the same with other aspects of our lives.
Okay.
And particularly with corruption, the top leadership has actually deliberately made, thrown corruption so much, in our faces that we have become apathetic to corruption.
Okay.
We no longer really feel anything.
Okay.
That, and it's deliberate, by the way. It's deliberate. They do that so that we really don't have a reaction to it, and so that they can continue with the mess.
I don't know, Celestine, if you want to weigh in on this.
I think, and it goes back to what I was talking about, our values and principles. I think people have become numb, because I think there are some areas where this becomes completely unacceptable and is reported. But in Kenya, we've gotten, I think we are used to it. And therefore, you know, we let a lot of that go. I think I just wanted to add something more on the public participation matter, that we say that, yes, there's the law, and it goes to this apathy, you know, that you're talking about. That there probably a lot needs to be invested in terms of awareness and actually operationalizing it, because actually our leaders won't do it. Since they won't do it, how about making actually our people, you know, drive this, you know, actually report this? So that's something we need to look at. Yep.
I think for me, if you're speaking about the presidency and, you know, the fight against corruption, there's no doubt that the president and his deputy have made mistakes in the last 6-7 years now. But I don't want to adopt a fatalistic position that things cannot change. Because as the chief executive of this country, the president stands in a particularly good position to lead us out of this abyss, at least begin to get us out of it. So I have listened to his rhetoric. Like many Kenyans, I would be skeptical, but I want to give him the benefit of doubt that he is serious with what he is doing. For the simple reason that, you know, if he is not serious, history will judge him very harshly. And history, particularly if you are at the level that he is, history can be very harsh.
Okay. All right, even as we conclude, I'd like to know now, how drastic can the measures be taken to ensure we stem this? Because that's where we need to think of next. How drastic do you think this can be? If we have seen a CS, the level of the CS Treasury being arrested, how much more can be done? How much more?
A lot, because if you start with that we're talking here about 21, 26, 27 billion, that's less than 1% of all our public spending. And what that tells you is the potential for other mischief. I think, for instance, that sometimes when you see the president speak about it, you don't doubt that he means well, though of course sometimes again he knocks himself out. But if you think about what he wanted to do, the president only needs to do two things. One, go to the Auditor General's reports, because he'll be dealing with this historically, and in those reports are documented exactly how public money gets misappropriated. Provide that to the DPP and ask him, look, chase whoever is mentioned in this report and take as many of them in jail as is possible. So that's the first. The second, if he really means it, that there's zero tolerance on corruption, I think he should come tomorrow and tell us that, look, in the interest of trying to look forward, I have asked these two gentlemen to resign, and I'm replacing them with people who must understand that the same standards will apply. And the DPP, for instance, will specifically be looking to ensure, because the Treasury is mostly the engine room for public spending in Kenya. Not necessarily drastic, because common sense is required. If you have accountants who know their work and look out there, and you have transparency in the performance of public functions, which this government has not done too well in, most of these things will actually come down over time. So there's no magic bullet, to be honest, but they're just a raft of sensible things that any manager who understands the leakage would take before his ship collapses.
And I think one thing can be done, just one thing. You know, apart from, of course, it is a complex problem, but there's one additional thing that can be done. At this point, if I were President Uhuru Kenyatta, I would actually declare corruption a national disaster. Declare it a national disaster. Once you declare it a national disaster, then commit every attention and resources to the fight against corruption. If you do that, you know, Rwanda, when it was faced with the genocide, it first dealt with that issue. And that is why it moved on. You cannot move on from a major crisis like what we have in Kenya with corruption by just skipping over it. You have to deal with it, you know, conclusively. If, for example, we just committed the money that has been lost in Aror and Kimwarer in the fight against corruption, we will succeed. We just need more courts. We need specialized courts that can deal with this problem, specialized courts that wake up in the morning, they have their own registry, they have everything, nothing else other than grand corruption. Grand corruption. Forget about this other, let the other courts, the anti-corruption courts that we have, the normal courts deal with, the normal problems we have with corruption and policemen being arrested and all this kind of thing. But the corruption that is at the heart of your government, assign a special, special courts that once a matter has been brought like this one, and the investigators have taken their time, 6 months, there's no even point of giving someone bail, because you can hear the case and conclude and find whether they have a case or not in 2 weeks. And these are people in authority anyway. They should ensure that our cells are habitable, that you can stay there 2 weeks and not die. So we need to commit our resources and our attention.
We could also think of the way Tanzania is doing it. Any graft case, there's no bail.
Well, I don't think that is necessarily the case. But if we say, there's no point of giving you bail because we will expedite these cases. We can even hear this case in 3 days. Some of the cases are very simple. You can actually hear them in 1 day. There might not be necessarily very complex matters if you give it a chance. So let it not be the business as usual, where we take cases to court, the accused persons get bail, the lawyers come and say they are sick. For every time you change lawyers and this lawyer is never available. Let there be special attention to these cases.
Okay.
And let us deal with it conclusively.
Okay. Yeah. You have a way forward, Celestine.
I think in addition to the two, the one I'm going to propose is a little bit different. I think about 2 years ago, the government also thought of measures to curb corruption, which was in the area of technology, for example. So I would suggest if there's another big step that the government needs to do is to prioritize the investment in technology that fights corruption.
Okay.
This includes technology around managing cyber crimes, technology that helps us prevent the loss of money, public funds. So we talked about blockchain. There was a task force that was set, is it about 2 years ago? Which was a blockchain and AI, artificial intelligence task force. And they were tasked with coming up with ways in which we could use that to curb corruption, amongst other things. I do believe we now need to invest in it and set money aside and look at how we can use technology. Today, we have so much at our disposal that we can even mine data and it can throw red flags in terms of where you should look at. So if I was to use technology to support, for example, the two actions that we talked about, it would be faster.
Okay.
And it's built in such a way that it's incorruptible.
All right, and Transparency International, this will not be the first time you're proposing something that you think can work, especially to stem corruption in this country. But having watched from the sidelines and, of course, put some action into it that have not succeeded, including the campaign you did pre-election, what would you think would be so drastic in your mind? Because this is something that you deal with every single day.
Well, Ken, I think I will just repeat what I said earlier. These questions are questions of leadership. I have no doubt that whether we get out of this mess or not is going to depend on the kind of leadership we get and how resolute the president is going to be. Not just in the law enforcement, because law enforcement is just a part of it. We have a very good constitution. We have put together very good laws. I think our public finance management framework, for example, is something that I am always proud to have participated in it because I think it was very well thought out. We have very many laws that if we just enforced them, I think the kind of support that the president has now given to the DCI and to the DPP must be given to other institutions that play roles that might look mundane but are very significant. And I'll give you an example.
Go ahead.
You know, the president gave some executive orders last year. One of them was on the question of disclosure of the beneficial owners of companies that do business with government. There's a portal that has been set up. But if you look at the way that portal has been set up, you see that there was some mischief. The idea was that you provide the data and make it impossible to work with it because you can't download it in a format that you can work with it, and it's not very useful. the register, the beneficial ownership registers, this is the work of the Business Registration Bureau. Resources need to be put in place to make sure that any entity that is registered in this country, any legal entity that is registered in this country, you can trace the beneficial owners of that entity. If we did that, all these questions we keep on talking about, Kenyan Chinese companies, and even the insinuation I saw that, in this dam case that you probably are dealing with Kenyan ownership in that company,
yes.
We will be able to address that. Then there is the important rule of access to information. This law was passed in 2016. It is fundamental for public participation. It is indispensable in the fight against corruption. So the president has to pay attention to it. Okay. The Commission on Administrative Justice has been given the responsibility to ensure the enforcement of this law. I do not get the sense that they have been provided with the resources that allow them to be able to discharge this mandate. And so government continues to operate. I mean, if you look at the way Treasury, for example, operates, you will see there's a lot of secrecy. Even though there are laws about openness, you don't see that in action, And we need to open up our procurement. There is the whole open contracting concepts and standards that are now out here, and countries are using them for the benefit of their own fight against corruption. Rwanda, very close home, is using an open contracting platform where citizens can actually participate openly. And then the core of it, again, and I could mention a lot of things, but I'll mention this as the last one. The question of campaign finance regulation is a very important one. The IBC will never enforce this law unless they feel they have the political support to be able to do it. The law is there, the regulations were disputed, and twice this law, the enforcement of this law has been suspended. And in 2022, it's likely to be suspended again. But it requires leadership for political leadership to say that this is the law and needs to be enforced. If we don't address our political financing questions, we certainly will not be able to address the systemic problems that we have in our body politic.
Okay, listening to you, I don't think I will conclude from what you're telling me that there's hope in this country. I don't know. There's no hope.
I am very hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
You're hopeful.
I am very hopeful.
Tell me which other country in our neighborhood has had, in the last 6 months, the cabinet secretary who's responsible for managing the biggest public expenditure in the country, in the region. No country in our region has a treasury that manages $30 billion per year. Once goes for 2 straight days to register a statement with at the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, and 6 months later, he's going to face prosecution in court. Now, whether he gets prosecuted, or whether he gets successfully, or rather, whether he gets convicted or not, is a different matter. That can only be something to be hopeful about.
Okay.
You can decide to be depressed about the sums of money and how easily government leaks money, but you can also see that a professional in the form of the DCIO, together with the DPP, I hope they're serious about taking all this forward, took their time, went out of the country, marshaled the evidence, and the brief that they provided, a 21-page brief, highlighting 28 names, and each of those being asked. And we know about the 8 offenses for which all these, the principal secretary and cabinet secretary, that's hope. We just hope that, in my view, the president and all of us builds on that.
Okay. Yeah. Because obviously the other argument is this cannot happen if it was not sanctioned by the president. There's no way you could arrest his cabinet secretary. But again, I'm just reminding you of what happened today in DRC Congo, right? About the Ebola. The minister just quit because it's not his fault, but he just quit. That cannot happen in this country. It will never happen in this country. So even as you want to inspire hope in us, we're thinking, well, let's see how this pans out. And there are a lot of things that is going to happen in the days forward. And someone just said that now that there's a scandal from this side, there will be another one from this side. So the week is not going to end. I don't know what you think. There will be other scandals.
One thing, I think Kwame has put it well, that we have reason to be hopeful. Okay. The fact that we have actually gone to the point of arresting, such key individuals not key in the sense of the crime, but key in the sense of government, I think it in itself is telling.
Okay.
And you know, Ken, you know, this is not something new, I'm sure. You know, this corruption has been going on. And you know, if it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 4 years ago, probably nobody would have been arrested. But the fact that now at least someone has been arrested or people have been arrested, you know, that is already something to be hopeful about, I think.
All right, so before I let you go, we usually have a cartoon of the week. We pick one, and this is one we picked from today. It's a little complex, a little untidy, but let's take a look at it, and then you tell me what you think about it. All right, could you put it full screen all around so that we see? That's the deputy president's leg, and says, yes, Rotich adds to the root of political gout, one more gout, you know. It's a little complex, but basically, the deputy president has said time and again, it's all around you can say it. He's basically said that, and his lieutenants have always said that, you know, the war on corruption is targeting one area. But unfortunately, we have seen this happening, and now that's the depiction. I don't know what you think. Let me begin with Wakili, because you've been speaking about this.
Well, I think if anything, it is actually the deputy president who threw himself in this mess. You know, first of all, by going to defend the fact that 7 billion was lost. To me, that alone was bad enough. To defend 7 billion being lost in itself was bad enough. And then secondly, he is on record as saying, because he's a herdsman, he knows. So perhaps actually he would really help Rotich by offering to be a defense counsel, or even offering to be a prosecution witness or defense witness.
Okay.
Because clearly, you know, he seems to know a lot about the whole thing.
All right. Kwame.
Well, you know, we all hear these murmurs about who exactly is behind this, and to be honest, I don't. I think this cartoon is too complex for nothing. The point is, the people who are in charge of the Treasury are the ones who authorized payments. They're the ones who are on the charge sheet, and they're the ones who are going to have to defend themselves. Okay. That's all.
Okay.
Well, I think it's a fairly complex one. I choose to see it from the perspective of liability. That you know, the liabilities, the political liability that or baggage that the deputy president has to carry is increasing. It's just increased with these you know, arrests and prosecutions. So that's the way I see it.
Okay. And finally, Celeste?
I think for me, I don't have a particular view around it. I think it's concluding a matter which has actually not been taken through the court. So I think due process really needs to happen. We need to see the conclusion, and if the officers that have been arraigned are guilty, you know, let the process go to its logical conclusion.
Okay.
And therefore, I think it's a process issue. So I think it's saying what it shouldn't be saying. We are not there yet.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
All right. I just brought it up. We pick cartoons randomly every week and we try to get your perspective. But I want to thank you. Before then, let's do the final part of the show. And you remember when members of parliament were forced to investigate Treasury for those responsible for the error that crippled the financial transactions of the entire government system. Now, the year is 2009, and the month is May. The finance minister then is Uhuru Kenyatta, and a supplementary budget has just been tabled in parliament, and the members of parliament realized there's an error of about 10 billion. It was 9.2 billion. And the ministry can't explain this. The members of parliament want answers on the other end. And the unanimous feeling at that time is that some of those figures have been sneaked into the supplementary budget and it won't be properly accounted for. So Finance Minister then, Uhuru Kenyatta, asked about the 10 billion hole, and he says it could be a typing error. Some of those zeros should have not been included. And obviously, Parliament accuses him of being arrogant and high-handed. And one of the writer put it at that time, that by admitting to what he called a typo in the supplementary budget, Finance Minister Uhuru Kenyatta joined the list of keyboard-blaming blunderers that caused governments huge financial losses, rocked relationships, or led to untold embarrassments. Just to note that Uhuru Kenyatta likes to work with the people he knows. And this has been his characteristic and that of his government. And if you doubt it, look at the head of the public service now. The name is Joseph Kinyua. He was then Uhuru Kenyatta's permanent secretary. A good place to end our show tonight. Thank you, lady, and thank you, gentlemen, for coming and sharing your perspective. At the end of every show, I honestly wonder if people listen to you, because if they do, there is something that should be done in this country. I wonder, but again, it's not up to me. Thank you for watching, and let's do this again. Next week on Tuesday, I'll be taking my leave. I'm going to see my mom in Migori, so Dibala Inea will be here with Sidebar. Thanks for watching and have a good night. All of them are online, so we go off air, but we're still online. Have a good night.